All right. Hi, everybody. And welcome to my live stream. Working on this Katydid model. And we kind of got the model mostly in place over the last few sessions. And so tonight I'm going to explore a few things. I want to take a look at how we can maybe, I don't know, make the overall model a little bit even more stylized, a little bit more fun and cartoony. Let's see if we can bring up some reference here. Over the last few sessions, pure ref, and also talk a little bit about detailing and maybe get into some poly painting as well. So that's what I'm going to be working on once I get my images up here. All right, here we go. So Katydid model. So again, this is a stylized version, so using the realistic, real-life Katydid as a starting point. I'm going to have some fun with it, do maybe something maybe more cartoony, which is it's nice to kind of stretch your stylistic abilities every once in a while. I tend to do more realistic stuff, but when I have some fun. This is a stylized version I did several years ago. It's okay. I think it could be taken even further. Okay, so let's put that, maybe I'll just put this down here. So what I was thinking I would do to start with, can I recommend a stylization course? Yeah, the one, she's actually a student of mine back at Noman in the old days, but now she's a ZBrush master and she's amazing. Letitia Gillette has some great courses that you can check out for doing cartoony stuff. Let me see if I can pull up something on her, because she's awesome. And you've seen her work if you've opened up ZBrush before. It's often used in the startup page. Letitia Gillette has some great courses that you can check out for doing cartoony stuff. Here's her art station. So she does really great work. So I know she does offer some courses, so you can drop her a line, and I'm sure she can direct you to them. I don't know if she teaches on Udemy or what, but she's a good place to start, especially if you don't want to do character stuff. The name bloopatone came from my first dog, whose name was Blue. She was a Labrador Hound mix, and her name was Blue, but I used to call her bloopatone, and it's just kind of stuck. How did I write that? Oh, Letitia, slight echo. Okay, I don't know why there's an echo. Maybe it's the, pull down the music a bit. Yeah, look her up. Give me just 1 second, see if I can deal with all these issues here. I have my speakers off, so I'm not sure why it would be echoing. Let's see. Well, what I would like to do to start off with is, let me see if maybe there's a problem with the, no, it's just the Yeti microphone. Let me know if the echo persists. I'll see if I can fix it. So what I thought I would do is kind of play with the proportions of this guy, and one great way to do that is to use Transpose Master, because I can, I have all of these as separate subtools, and at the same time they all have different levels of subdivision. So by using the Subtool Master, I can kind of play with the whole thing as one single subtool at the lowest subdivision level, and I can stretch and pull things and test things out, and then transfer all the changes back to the original model here. So let's make sure that I don't have any Z-spheres in here, because I want to get rid of anything that I'm not using. I think it looks okay. Skin, Z-sphere. I haven't gone through here and named all these things, but I'm going to do that later, just because I'm lazy. So what I'll do is go to Z plugin, make sure that everything's visible. Z plugin, transpose master, and T-pose mesh. So that's going to create a single subtool, separate tool, single subtool, having at its lowest subdivision level. Okay, now let's have some fun with this. So I'm going to turn on symmetry, X to turn on symmetry, and I'm not going to do dynamic symmetry, I'll turn on local symmetry. And let's just take the move brush and bring it to a very low Z intensity and start to, let me get my pen here. And let's see. I like giving them chubby cheeks, so I think that's a great way to, I don't want to lose that. Maybe give him more of a hunchback here. Excuse me for a second. Because you can see in some of these the nice curved back here, so that'd be kind of fun to play with. Make the eyes bigger. The bigger the eyes, the cuter the bug, right? And maybe I'll bring the antenna down just a little bit. The other thing we can do is play with some deformers here. So I'm just going to mess around. And press W for the gizmo and open up here. We can take a look at some of these deformers. So there's a lot of them. I only use a few of them, but they're fun to explore. We can play with the deformer here, which is basically like a lattice. If you've used a program like Maya, you're probably familiar with the lattice deformer. So you can start to play with the number of divisions. Let's see. There we go. I'm going to keep the divisions there fairly low, but increase these divisions. And let's see, do we actually have symmetry on this? Let's make sure we have symmetry on. There we go. Okay, so I want to make sure that it's mirrored symmetry. There we go. I mean, it's just kind of another way to use the move tool, but the nice thing is you can play with this, and then if you don't like the results, just reset the lattice. So it's an interesting way to kind of quickly mess around with some shapes. Like, you definitely don't want to bend the legs like that. That's not good. But just kind of playing with it, get some ideas. And like I said, if we don't like it, we just reset the lattice or delete it. We can also make changes here, and then after the fact, still change. You should be able to change the divisions even after making some deformations, which is not the case with like a Maya lattice. But let's see, make sure I'm not lying to you. I'll just make some changes here randomly, and nope, I guess you make the changes, it resets the lattice. So that's the lattice. I think it's okay, but it's not really doing anything for me. So I'm going to reset this one, and let's try bend curve. And so can change the number of dots, and then let's change this. Whoops, don't like that. Change the smoothness. Not crazy about that. What I want to do is bring down the number of dots to just a few. I'm going to pull this up a little bit. And I want to twist it and change the scale. Flatness. That's not doing it for me. So let's reset this and then go for taper. Interesting, but I don't like any of them, so I'm just going to delete and go back to using the move brush. But it's kind of fun to play with. The BG is too attractive to the eye. It is too well camouflaged. If you accept a little crit on your original stylized Katydid, the background is attractive to the eye. It's too well camouflaged. Yeah, I mean, I did it many years ago, so it's fine. I'm just not crazy. I don't have subdivisions in Transpose Master. And deformers don't work if you have subdivisions in Transpose Master. We'll come back into the scene with artifacts. Okay, that's good to know. I don't like them anyways. I've been doing this sculpting. I've been doing ZBrush since 2004. I've been focusing on insects since about 2012. So let's see. Bit of inflate here. Let's see. I'm just kind of playing with the antenna. I'm not going to do anything weird like a spiral, but maybe just give it a little bit more of a personality, kind of like bunny ears or something. Not necessarily big and fat, but maybe just kind of the overall shape. Just to give a little bit of style. I think the eye is facing the front a little bit more. The face is the thing that I'm kind of mostly obsessed with. That's obviously what we're, for cartoon characters, when you spend most of the time looking at. me go back to this guy. I can kind of compare. Interesting. I think I made him mostly fatter. Is it an improvement? I don't know. I kind of feel like I went a little bit too far with making him too big. But we can kind of do this. Yeah, I think he got too big there. Back to about there, I think. Yeah, I mean the mandibles here. I think on my original one, I thought they looked kind of cute. So I kind of like the how fat that he almost looks like he's got a smiley face here. You're talking about the palps here. These could probably use a little bit of inflate just to make them look a little bit more cartoony. These are gotten a little bit spoon-like. The old move topological brush. Put a little bit of an S curve into these just so they're a bit more interesting. And there's a little bit of a bend here, which I'm not crazy about. Maybe like this is, I think, okay, but let me do this. I'm going to put my move topological down here. So I'm going to go into config and turn on enable customize, go to the brush palette and control alt drag move topological down here. And then preference, what I'll do is, no, it's fine there. And then store config. For character modeling, there are various software. It's good to learn all the softwares because in studio character modeling, artists will do work on one or more software. That is true. However, this is a this is a ZBrush live stream that is sponsored by Maxon, creators of ZBrush. So I'm going to focus entirely on ZBrush techniques, but I typically use a number of different software packages, including Maya and a little bit of Blender and some Substance and that kind of stuff. But ZBrush is my generally my go-to because I've been using it for so long. It's what I'm most comfortable with and it's what I like the most. But you know, here's a question. It's like, you know, what I'm doing right here is this is a personal project that I'm doing for fun. It's not necessarily something I mean, you know, I wouldn't not show it to a potential employer, but you know, I mean, if you're just trying to do everything to get a job, you're going to find yourself not having a whole lot of fun as a 3D modeler. sometimes you just got to do stuff for fun, and that's kind of the point of the live streams as far as the way I do them. The job market right now sucks anyway, so you might as well have some fun. Should probably have these overlapping this way. These are kind of dubious the way they're attached here, but I think that's all right. All right, well, I mean, I think that's okay. I'm going to come back to this later. I'm going to pull this up a little bit, give it more of like a little kind of hood kind of look to it. Let's see. And then I'm going to pull this out a little bit. Give it a little fatness back here. That's too much. Too distorted. All right, let's see. Compare it with our original. I think it's a little bit, well, it's cute. Did I just make everything bigger? Possibly. In relation to the legs, but I like this guy a little bit better than this guy. This guy's a little boring. So let's pull the trigger, and we can always change it again. And I'll do Z plugin T pose to sub T. It's kind of cute. And then let's say this is a new version. Let me save. Okay. All right, so we got that, and now maybe we can play with doing some little detailing. So I'm going to set this all to high. I think it is already, but might as well try. And maybe play with a little bit with the face, just adding details here and there. Could always try. I don't know if I want to go as far as this. That one's very wacky, although it's kind of fun. Let's see. There we go. There's a nice kind of good bit of reference here for some ideas. For some reason that's not working. There we go. And I'll use a SK cloth brush. We got 922,000, so I'm going to subdivide this. Gives it 3 million. Yeah, I mean, most of these are photographs. You're talking about this guy over here. This is an actual insect, so that's definitely a photograph. Yeah, I mean, corn cricket. It's an interesting name. I mean, katydids, grasshoppers, and crickets are all kind of related. Definitely, I think, need some work around here in the antenna area. I think I made the antennas too curvy, but I'll fix that in a second. Okay, this has kind of got this. I don't want to make the details too grisly because I want to keep the cuteness here, but I like adding some details because then it can help in the poly painting to really kind of bring out some variation in the surface. And then we can kind of give him, make him look older, giving him insect eye bags. On the brush. Let's go here, and then I'm going to go shift down a little bit and fix some of these issues here because this is too wobbly. allergies drive me crazy right now. Springtime here. Hello, kitty. Okay, that's a little better. And let's go. Subdivisions. And let's subdivide this again, get it up to 2.5 million. I'll make a little bit of detail here, just for fun. Everything's for fun at this point. So I don't know if I'm going to do a straight up green one this time. I think I might explore some different colors. Since this is a made up species, we can kind of do whatever we want here. Maybe I'll make them bright pink. That would make Valentine very happy. She likes pink. Which makes sense because her name is Valentine. And come in here and just kind of add a little bit of this kind of thing. Let's turn on the solo button. And do this. Get some clay tubes in here. Whoops, that's too much. Let's bring down the intensity on that. Let's take a look at these antennae. Maybe I can make them slightly more interesting. For these guys, let's see, they often have lots of little segments with hairs. Of course, all the photography here is blurry, so it's hard to see. Yeah, you can see there are lots of little segments, not necessarily overlapping. But you can see a little bulge there. So do I want to sculpt that at the moment or no? Here's a good, can take a little bit of liberty with that. I mean, here it's kind of like, it's almost like bamboo. I kind of like this sort of bamboo look that some of these guys have in their segmentation of the antenna. So what I might do is I'm using plate brush. Let's do this. Maybe go down a couple subdivision levels here. Depending on the different types of, I've done a lot of different insect antenna, and I do different approaches each time depending on what I'm trying to do. If I'm doing something realistic, and sometimes it's a matter of like literally just like in this case making a long piece of geometry and then sculpting the divisions in there. If the divisions are going to be, you know, between each segment are not going to be that strong. I like making this kind of just like weird little bamboo or little bone shapes, even though it's not very accurate. But for other times, I'll actually make, you know, like a little cup, a single cup, and then duplicate it, make each cup sort of holding the next cup, or things like that. Sometimes sculpting the actual separation between each segment can get a little tedious, and in this case I'm keeping it simple, so it's not too bad. Done it a number of different ways. Fly antenna, of course, are completely different than lots of different antennas are very different. I keep seeing people doing like dragonflies, like for logos, and they have these long curling antennae. It's like dragonflies actually have very short, stubby, not very interesting antennae. So I hate when people mix and match. It's usually when somebody's doing like a logo or something like that, as opposed to a 3D model. That kind of stuff drives me crazy. I just saw Snow White the other day, yesterday. It was good. I mean, I liked it. As fine as the live action Disney movies go. I think, you know, I kind of judged it within that framework. Like, is it ever going to replace the original animation version? No, but it's kind of an interesting experiment in filmmaking, and it's entertaining, and I'm sure it made a lot of people happy and whatever. But I do have one big complaint with the movie that drove me crazy, is that they really, really overdid the fireflies in a couple of the scenes, and that was like really distracting. Like there's just in one scene it was like clearly dawn in the morning, and they had all these fireflies out. I'm like, that seems odd. But maybe there might be some species of fireflies that go at dawn, but most of what I've read is like they're usually at dusk. And you'll have several species of fireflies that will actually occupy the same ecosystem, which is really interesting. So the different species, and what they'll do is they'll actually go in shifts, not like they actually have meetings and work these things out, but it's just through the process of evolution. Over time, you'll have one species that maybe comes out a little bit earlier, and then another that comes out a little bit later, and then they all have different signals, like the flashing. And that's the other thing that drives me crazy with fireflies in movies, and they try and make fireflies look all magical and beautiful. That's fine, you know, I don't have a problem with that. But they constantly have the fireflies with a constant non-flickering glow. In Snow White, they did have some flickering, but it was sort of just occasionally, where they had other fireflies like hold their glow for several minutes, and it's just like, it's just not how fireflies work. So it really drove me crazy. But even nitpicking on the biology is not the same as like saying you just have too many fireflies in the scene, and it loses the magical quality. It overdoes it, and so it's just like you can't even pay attention to what's going on in the scene because you've got all these little glowing dots. And then, as my wife pointed out, you didn't really see any of the glow when they were coming close to the faces of the characters. You didn't see any of the light reflected on the faces of the characters, which is also very irritating because there are so many of the damn things and they're so bright. So I just feel like the fireflies in Snow White suffered from what some doctors call cowbell syndrome. In other words, there was a producer in the room, or an art director, who just kept going in saying, more fireflies, I got a fever, I need more fireflies, and it just like never ending. It's like, guys, knock it off, the fireflies. Again, animals in the forest need to be able to sleep at night. There's no way they're getting any sleep with that many fireflies. That's my firefly rant. Otherwise, it's a decent movie. I liked it. I thought that I'm not like a Disney super fan or anything like that. Disney's okay. You know, when it comes to 3D animation, cartoony stuff, I prefer Illumination. But they did get Gal Gadot's Wicked Witch was, or whatever they call her in that movie, evil witch, queen, stepmother, whatever, was spot on. She was amazing. That's my movie review for tonight. Let's see. Alright, we're almost at the end here of the antenna, I think. We'll maybe make some stubby clubs at the end. Katydids don't really have clubs at the end of their antenna, but ants do. They actually use the sort of long, elongated end of the antenna sometimes to beat each other up, because ants go to war. Whenever I hear people say, it's like, human beings are the only species that do this, or only species that do that. They're the only species that go to war with each other. It's not true. There are plenty of ant species where the competing nests of the same species of ants will actually go to war with each other, and they could be quite vicious, because they're very territorial. I mean, you're talking about a superorganism where two colonies are occupying the same ecosystem and so forth, so therefore they're fighting over the same resources, and it's going to get vicious. So E.O. Wilson once said that if ants had nuclear weapons, they wouldn't hesitate to use them. You know, they'd invent nuclear weapons and use them probably within a week to their full extent. Ants just, you know, they're vicious creatures. And, you know, coming back to fireflies can be pretty vicious too when it comes to competing with each other. They look really cute from afar, but if you look at them really closely, they can be quite terrifying. There you go. I kind of like that. I mean, it's, you know, it's just a cute little antenna, and I think it looks nice from far away. And it kind of, you know, adds this kind of rhythmic quality that the legs have to some degree. So I think that's kind of neat. Let's save that. There is a it's a really great book on fireflies, biology of fireflies. If you're curious, or if, let's say, you're working on a movie for Disney and you want to do some research, this is a really fantastic book. And it's very accessible. So I highly recommend Silent Sparks by Sarah Lewis. Just a little plug there. Okay, so that's kind of cool. Let's go back to the head here. You know, I guess normally I would break the face out into different parts for the mandibles. I don't know if I'm going to do that for this. Let's consider this more of a concept sculpt. So I'm going to be lazy and keep this as one big mesh. Let's go in here and deepen this a little bit. Just kind of experimenting here with some mandible details. This guy's kind of lumpy. And I might go over here to the clay tubes. I like to do this and then smooth it out just because it adds a little bit of grain to the surface so it's not so perfectly smooth. For this one, I mean, I want it, since it's cartoony, I want to keep it mostly smooth, but I don't want it to look too perfect. I want it to have some imperfections to it. Now, of course, my wife would give me a hard time because right now this guy is perfectly symmetrical. So I might have to build in some asymmetry to give him something more of an interesting look. But right now I'm working mostly symmetrically. Well, I'm working entirely symmetrically. Just to sort of save time. I know it's laziness on my part, but I just want to have a little bit of a grain there. Kind of like maybe I'll use the pink and orange from this image that I have in my reference as the basis for the coloring on this guy, because I kind of like that. It's different from the green one. Let's get in here and just kind of play with some shapes here. I don't want to put too much detail on here. I'm going to lose that kind of facial expression that he has that I like, but just something that I can play with. It's kind of like a little mustache here. His name is Pierre. There we go, that looks kind of cool. I'm going to pull this down a little bit. Maybe make it look a bit like a lower lip there. I mean, I don't know. Maybe this is kind of like suggesting a nose, and this is suggesting the mouth. I mean, this is the mouth, obviously, but purposes of making a cartoon character. Let's see what it looks like. Perspective there. Oh, that's kind of cool. Just overdo it a little bit. I don't know if you can overdo something a little bit, but I'm going to try. There we go. Jiminy Cricket. Kinda. Let's save that. And I think what I'll do, because if I go through and just detail the whole thing, it's going to be kind of boring viewing. And so what I think I'm going to do is spend a little bit of time in the palps here, and then I'm going to do some poly painting, because I feel like if I just detail all night, it's not going to be the most fascinating thing to watch. You know, kind of spread it, shake things up, a little bit of poly painting, a little bit of detailing. Normally I do like all the detailing, and then I'll do some poly painting, but I don't know. I change it when I can. Solo button and go in here. I'm just going to do a little bit. I don't need to overdo this stuff. It's already looking pretty good. Kind of like balloons. And polygroups in here. Yeah. So I'm going to go in here and do brush. Actually, do I have it? No, I don't. I'm going to go in here, turn on. Let's move this off to the side for a second. Enable customize, brush, auto masking, mask by polygroups. I'm going to bring this down here, and then store config, and turn on mask by polygroups. Since they all have different polygroups, that way I can do brush strokes on one part and it won't interfere with the other ones. Helps add to the precision. Just kind of adding a little bit of a grain here to make it look more organic. So Just hitting it with the clay tubes brush and then smoothing it out afterwards. And, almost like cross-hatching in a way. Nice way to get kind of that claymation look as well. Probably exaggerate it more to give it a claymation look, but a little subtle kind of version of it's all right. All right, so there we go, something like that. Let's save that real quick. And I can do the same on these palps, but I think right now I don't want to get too boring, so I'm going to start poly painting, I think. So I'll switch to this shader and choose save. I like this pink, purple, green, and orange. Excuse me. Allergies, sorry. This kind of thing with the sort of spots on it, I think is kind of cool. So maybe I'll go for something like that. I mean, this guy's like all the colors of the rainbow. He's got yellow, he's got blue, he's got red, purple, green, everything. You gotta love it. For this version, I didn't put any goofy stuff on the top of his head. Maybe I should have. I suppose I could add it later if I really wanted to. Maybe I'll see how it goes with the painting, and then it wouldn't be too hard to add something up there. Let's see how it looks with the paint first, and then I'll decide if I want to add that. So let me do this guy, and I'm just going to start by throwing on a coat of pink. His name is Pinky Pierre. And I'll just do color. Where did my interface go? It's behind this. Fill object. And I'll go in here and get my paintbrush and go in here with color spray. I'm going to set the placement of the color spray down a bit and maybe get an alpha like this. And let's get a little slightly warmer, darker, reddish color like this. Okay, there we go. It's just a display issue. Oh, I see. I turned that off. Duh. Okay. I'm going to hold the shift key, turn off Z add for my smooth brush so that now it's a blur brush. And let's bring the RGB intensity down a bit. And I'm just going to start by kind of putting in some purplish color around the edges here. And then hold the shift key to blur that poly paint out a little bit. I'm just going to do kind of a quick overall starter paint before I go in and change the colors around a bit. I really like poly painting a lot in ZBrush. I do use Substance for a lot of the other maps and baking maps and that kind of thing, but for diffuse color or albedo or whatever, my favorite is poly paint. I keep hitting the Alt key, that's why I'm getting white there, because that's the secondary color. What I could do is maybe make this like orange, yellowish orange, and that way every time I hold the Alt key I get orange in there. That works. And so that way I can mix in the red and the pink. I can also turn on the gradient button to kind of mix the two colors in single stroke based on the alpha, and that could be kind of fun. But I think for this I'm just going to go alternating pink and orange. Sorry, dark pink and orange, just to get an initial coat going. And then for the mandibles down here, I'm going to get some yellow and orange going. Blend it together using the shift key. That's kind of fun. I'm going to turn off mask by polygroups. Anywhere we can find the TW clay tubes. That is a brush created by Tomas Wittelsbach. He does a live stream, I think once a week here. You can check the schedule, see when he's live streaming, and send him a message. It's basically a variation of the clay tubes brush. Let's do a quick comparison. Because we might be able to just kind of create our own here. and I think it was also kind of a variation on the SK clay tubes, which is Sakaki Kuro's brush. So here's regular clay tubes, and let's double click on this and take out the brush. So here's regular clay tubes, and the TW clay tubes. Clay tubes. If we go down here to the curve menu and do a quick comparison, I can see that it doesn't look like there's a whole lot of difference there. This is a good way to go about just sort of deconstructing how brushes was created. We can open this up and then go from one setting to the next. So regular clay tubes, and then TW clay tubes. So that kind of looks the same right there. And then regular clay tubes. Let's go down to samples. TW clay tubes. No difference there. Elasticity looks like 0, 0, 0. So far we're not getting a whole lot of variation here. Twist, I don't think there's anything different here. And that's TW clay tubes. There's regular clay tubes. Orientation, TW clay tubes, regular clay tubes. Surface, no, I don't think there's any surface on there. Modifier, so this must be where the difference is, right? TW clay tubes, regular clay tubes. Now sculptress, auto masking, there's got to be more to it than that. Has back face mask on. Okay, back face mask. Tablet pressure. No difference. Alpha and texture. Telling me, okay. TW clay tubes. We have adaptive map size. What's adaptive map size? Hold the control key. Let's move this out of the way. Adaptive map size. Adaptive map size slider will adjust alpha map quality when applying a stroke. When the alpha is at a smaller size on the surface, ZBrush will automatically adjust the map to a lesser quality and raise the quality as the brush stroke enlarges. So far, that is the only difference we've seen between TW clay tubes and regular clay tubes, is adaptive map size. So that's really boring. I doubt there's clip brush, smooth brush that has a smooth. So wow, we're talking about not a whole lot of difference here. Between the two brushes, regular clay tubes and TW clay tubes. We have basically back face mask, and then down here under alpha and texture. So I've been wasting my time using this brush, is what I'm saying. And then of course the Z intensity is much lower. So the Z intensity on TW clay tubes is like 10 or 7, and then Z intensity on regular clay tubes is like 49. So I'm still very surprised to see that there's that little difference, but I'm not seeing much here otherwise. I think that there would be something in the curve, but no. Learn something new every day. Or in this case, oh, okay, so here's a difference in the embed. So TW clay tubes has an embed of 10, regular clay tubes, no. Nope, sorry, I just hit the wrong brush. They're the same. That's really disappointing. I guess I should have done this before. Oh well. Yeah, stroke menu. Good choice. There's probably something different in there. Aha. No. Neither of them have lazy mouse on, but if I turn on TW clay tubes and turn on lazy mouse, let's turn on lazy mouse for both of them. Lazy step. It's not going to make much of a difference. Under modifiers here. Roll distance is 10 for TW clay tubes, so that was a good suggestion. That might be the biggest difference, but if you don't have lazy mouse on there, I don't know if it's going to make a whole lot of difference, because roll isn't activated, right? So this is not going to make a whole lot of difference if roll isn't on, right? Roll distance is 10 for TW42, so that's a good suggestion. So I don't know if that's really that big of a deal, the difference there. I don't have curve on there, not Sculptris Pro. Okay. Now, you know, it's not really derailing my process, because I think it's kind of an interesting question. And for those who may not be as familiar with ZBrush, it's a good suggestion to take a look at the brush menu and kind of compare brushes, custom brushes. In this case, the results were exceptionally disappointing, but what are you going to do? So yeah, you can just adjust a few things on the clay tubes brush and pretty much get the same result. It's a good suggestion to take a look at the brush menu. I'm going to, all right, let's do a little bit of a darker purple here. So yeah, you can just adjust a few things on the clay tubes brush. Bring up the RGB intensity a little bit more. And oops, switch color. There we go. There we go. I'm going to just kind of mix these together, and then I'll do some strokes on top of this to kind of break it up and make it look a little bit more interesting. So I'm considering this sort of doing coats of paint here, and then blending the colors together as I go, to get some interesting strokes on top of this to kind of break it up. I'm considering this sort of doing coats of paint here and then blending the colors together. I think there's a lot of interesting things you can do in the brush palette with the samples and the modifiers. That's where you can really start to get brushes to do interesting things. It's one of those things that I used to play with it a lot, but I haven't really explored it too much recently. I think there's a lot of interesting things you can do in the brush palette with the samples and the modifiers. That's where you can really start to get brushes to do interesting things. It's one of those things that I used to play with it a lot, but I haven't. Again, this is like super symmetrical. So we'll have some of that purple spill out down here, just in the tops. Kind of just to draw attention to that area, that division, and then maybe along here, and then darker in the back. That purple and orange are blending together to make a really odd color. Okay, so that's kind of like an initial, just getting some color on there to start with. And then what I'm going to do next is I'm going to break it up a little bit to kind of create sort of this interesting, not necessarily the overt pattern, but maybe an under pattern. And I'm going to steal a technique from Madeline Spencer that I learned a long time ago that's good for this. I think what I might do, though, is just a little bit more yellowish orange down here. Oops. There we go. I don't want to lose that kind of, I like that deep orange there. There we go, something like that. So it's transitioning into a sort of different color space down here. Not color space, but you know what I mean. Different area of color. Then we'll get some deep reds just in the edges here. There we go. That looks nice. Insects, I haven't really gone in here, but you notice that there's a lot of green next to the purple. Insects, like plants, will often use complementary colors in really interesting ways. Sometimes it's to draw attention to certain parts of the body, or it can often be obviously camouflage, but it's kind of a cool transition there. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to switch to drag rect, and let's do this kind of veiny alpha. Not that one. Not this one. This one. And I'm going to I'm going to set the color to like a very whitish pink. Something like that. And maybe turn off symmetry and start to kind of paint over like this, and then smooth that. And you can see it's going to kind of break up those colors there, and to get something that looks a bit more organic. And this is a technique that I learned, a very old technique in ZBrush. It works really well on like human skin, but I use it on insects as well because it can create some really interesting. As you start to layer more colors on top of this, it'll get even more interesting looking. It looks like, I'm not going to say subsurface scattering, I'm going to say like a subsurface coloring, for lack of a better term. Because it's like insect, the exoskeleton is created by secreting layers of chitin, and so just like human skin has layers to it, insects have layers to their skin as well. They're just a very different material, so you're going to have very different properties when they interact with light. And then also insects tend to change colors over their lifespan depending on the bug. Ants will tend to get darker. They start out lighter and tend to get darker depending on the ant. There are some ants that are dark from the very beginning. And it kind of looks like a clown kind of face, but I'm okay with that. This is the kind of thing that I kind of expect using this technique. So it may look weird and like I'm not going in the right direction, but as I said, we're going to do many layers of color on top of this, so it will start to look better as we go along. Because you notice I'm doing a lot of kind of fast. I'm not sitting in here doing like ultra detailed fine work with the color. It's all just get stuff going really, really fast. Another thing I like to do is go into the brush palette, and I'm going to hold the shift key, and under smooth brush mattifiers, turn up the alt brush size, so that way the smooth brush is much larger than the regular brush. So notice when I have this draw size for paint and then I hold the shift key, the smooth brush is much larger. So I can bring down the size of the paintbrush here and still have a large smooth brush. And I like that because, it's the smooth brush in this case is blurring the colors together. And the larger the size of the brush, the more intense the blur. I'm going to hold it. Yeah, it's already the intensity is already at 100. So this is kind of, I'm kind of getting this kind of quality here and there. I might increase the RGB intensity though. Okay, so kind of just do a little bit more here. Then what I'm going to do is just add a little bit more breakup. Let's see, a little bit more down here. Is let's experiment with doing a little bit of surface noise. Go down here to surface noise and increase the noise scale. Just kind of playing a little bit of a interesting pattern here. Choose OK, and then I'm going to do mask by noise. And let's hide the mask. Oops. Okay. Thank you. Pure riff. Control H to hide the noise. I'm going to pick like a dark red-ish color, bring down the RGB intensity, and just kind of fill the object just to bring in some like red splotches real quick there, just to add a little bit more breakup. And then, you know, smooth this down too, so that we have kind of an interesting, more organic pattern to it. So just some quick tips here on getting some interesting colors going. And now we can start to fine-tune this and make it a little bit more interesting, like our friend in the image. So what I'll do now is let's play with some of this weirdness here. Not the spots. I think I'll do the spots last, but let's see if we can bring in some of those greens. And I kind of want to do it in the areas where the yellow dominates. So I'm going to switch this back to color spray and maybe choose like an alpha like this and make the RGB really low intensity and pick like a yellowish green, so something that's not too far off from this right here. And I think if we see this right here, it's like, I don't know, this might look awful. We'll see. Let's save this first before we start messing this up. And of course I have the RGB intensity really low. And maybe too low. Up to that. Okay. So you can see we're getting something like this along the edge here. And this looks like, yeah, it's kind of interesting. In these areas right here. And here's a good example of like almost close to sort of complementary colors, almost. I mean, they're on the opposite sides of the color square, from each other. But I like these kind of dark purple, magenta, and green sort of combination. Obviously, you see that a lot in plants. So, plants and bugs share a lot of sort of similar coloring strategies, obviously, because they are closely connected in ecosystems. Notice I'm using the word ecosystem to actually refer to an ecological system and not a software platform or economic system. It drives me crazy when nerds throw around ecosystem and they have no idea what the word actually means. Ecology is actually one of the most interesting sciences, and I didn't realize that until much later in life, reading books by E.O. Wilson and other books on evolutionary biology. You start to realize that, wow, there's a lot going on in ecology, because you're essentially studying the ecosystem, and that basically means that you're studying the evolution of many interdependent organisms all living within sharing the same space over time, and that can be really fascinating. That's when you see evolution really start to do crazy stuff. We tend to think in popular culture of evolution as sort of on an individual basis, competition between individuals and passing down genes, but that's a tiny sliver of what actually evolutionary biology is. It's a very, very deep science, and it's far from settled. It's obviously, a lot of people seem to think that Darwin wrote a few things down and it hasn't changed since then, when in fact it's actually a science that is extremely, it's evolving. And it's very vibrant, and it's very fascinating. And then there's a trend to sort of combine evolutionary biology with developmental biology, the study of how organisms develop from fertilization all the way to adulthood or whatever. That's called Evo Devo, and that's really interesting too. Some cool books on that. I know it sounds like 80s tribute band or something, but okay, so we got a green mess here. So let's do a little bit let's bring some of the yellow back in here, because we've strayed a bit and it's starting to clash in a not good way. Let's bring up RGB intensity a bit more. We can kind of fade it down into these areas. I'm not following this pattern at all. I'm just kind of following some of the ideas here that I see suggested in the colors here and the transitions. Let's bring a little bit more this. Looking at these katydids and seeing pretty much just about anything nature can come up with is represented here color-wise. It is amazing to me that the patterns are so symmetrical, especially if you look at butterflies, because we're talking about cells, individual cells. The cell on this side of the face is very far away from the cell on this side of the face, yet they are both choosing black pigments, not the exact same shape, but you can see there's bilateral symmetry in the markings here. And that's always fascinating to me. And then, of course, there's insects where there's no symmetry in their coloring, or they have a mix of the two, And, what determines coloring in insects is, again, that's something where we tend to think, oh, it's camouflage, or basically it's warning to other predators that they might not taste good, what's known as and then there's Batesian mimicry, which is basically mimicking a bad tasting or poisonous species, or venomous species, even though the insect itself might not taste bad or be venomous or poisonous. But there's also things like sexual selection and that kind of thing, and just weird stuff that happens in evolution that we're just starting to begin to understand. I mean, it's a very new science. It's only a couple hundred years old. That's not old by any means. But there's also things like sexual selection and just weird stuff in evolution. So now I'm going to bring some of this yellowing down here. a cool, interesting mix. And if I want this to look like a lower lip, I might leave it that pinkish color, but then color some green underneath it to really kind of bring it out, the greenish yellow. So I'm going to hold this C key and just sample colors from the surface now. Well, and then quickly change my mind and change it to something else. Maybe get some darker colors here. And of course, I can also change the alpha a little bit too. That's kind of cool. See if we can connect these areas a little bit. And get some splotches going. Little splotches. Mix it up. That's kind of cool. And then I'm really using the smooth brush a lot to blur those and blur and blend, and then draw on top of it. And then if you have this kind of very soft, blurred, kind of splotchy colors, and then you start to draw these darker, more defined stuff on top of it, that gives it kind of the quality. It looks kind of like a subsurface kind of effect. And the contrast between the blurry, soft blend of colors and then the sharp detail on top is really kind of interesting. So there's that. We can take a look up here. We see some of the color return, and then we also have some blues down here as well. But I think I'm going to go back to a very light pink and just draw some squiggles here. RGB intensities, and this is more of a drawing kind of thing as opposed to using an alpha. It's really just an experiment. I mean, if it doesn't work, you just color over it. A lot of times just layering this kind of stuff, you can get some really interesting effects. That's where the happy accidents happen, as it were. Another technique to use that I use fairly frequently, since I sculpted some detail but not a lot of detail, I can go in here and use some cavity mask. So I'll go in here to masking and mask by cavity, and you get a little bit right there. Maybe I can play with the cavity profile, and I'm going to invert that and hide it. And maybe just get sort of dullish, yellowish green, very low RGB intensity, and then just hit color, fill object a few times, just to see if we can bring out some of that detail. It's kind of interesting. Another really cool technique, we can use, mask by smoothness. There's not a whole lot of sculpted detail in here compared to some of my other models, so you might not get this to show up very much. That's kind of interesting. I'm going to save that for later though, when we get into doing the markings. But you can also do mask by color, mask by polypaint. This can get really interesting. So let's play with this for a second. The way this works is I'll zoom in on this window, and then I can drag from here to start to pick a color that's polypainted on the window, on the model. Right, so I'm masking that pink color, and you can see I'm moving it around and it's selecting different colors, and then I can play with the tolerance here. Sorry. And this is a cool way to create patterns. So that's just one color. You can experiment with, I'm going to do overwrite, and then let's choose another one. Well, maybe I don't want to do overwrite. Yeah. just kind of experimenting here. Let's turn this off and go back to overwrite. Let's do this, and then I'm going to hide the mask, and maybe with that a pinkish hue. I like a pinkish hue, as George Costanza would say. It's a violet color here, really low RGB intensity, and just do fill object a few times. That might have been too much, so I'm going to back off a little bit. That's kind of cool. And clear the mask. So just another technique to kind of play with as you're exploring. I'm going to get some of that deep orange back. Oops. And let's go back to color spray. And this. Turn on symmetry. Kind of making a mess. Control H hides the mask. Does ZBrush have cavity map coloring, kind of like Substance? Yeah, you can. This one doesn't have very deep cavities on it, but if you go down to masking, you can actually build it into the brush. So I've been doing it using the masking palette, right? So mask by polypaint. There's lots of different options here. You can mask by cavity and that kind of thing. So you can adjust this as well, the graph here, to change the kind of quality of the masking, or how it's masked on the subsurface. So you can use that, and that's kind of cool. You can see it getting these nice stripes and that kind of stuff. But you can also build it into the brush. So if I go into the brush here, the paint brush, and I do auto masking, there is also cavity mask right here, where you can turn up the intensity and then turn up the curve, and then that's built into the brush. So that's another option. And you can see that there's also several different types of auto masking: backface mask, color mask. I haven't used color masking that much, so I haven't used this as well. So that's an interesting one to explore. I don't know how that difference. Let's see. So that's another option. And you can see that there's also several different types of auto masking. Press color mask to use a model's poly painting as a mask. So it's kind of interesting. This is an automatic effect, and the mask will not be shown. It will change dynamically as the color of the model changes. So that's interesting. Let's play with this a little bit. I'll turn on like a light peach color, just so we can kind of see how it works, or if it works. And turn up the RGB intensity. Oh, that's kind of cute. He's got peach little cheeks. So you can see it's kind of masked. It's getting a nice little bit of variation in there, which I kind of like. So, getting a nice bit of speckling. So I haven't used that feature before, so that's a new one on me. But I like what it's doing. Does that answer your question? This is just the regular paint brush, and I've just adjusted a few settings in the auto masking, but it's part of ZBrush. There's nothing that special about it. In fact, the alpha I'm using is a stock alpha, and the only thing I've done to the stroke is I've turned the color variation pretty low, so because I don't like to have too much color variation. I want to have more control over the colors. So this is kind of fun. That way I'm getting some of the peach up here, and then that's kind of reflected in my reference. The peach to the green, peach to the green. I don't know what that means, but it sounds profound. Peach to the green, baby, peach to the green. It's a new Pixies song. I also love some of these dark reds in here, so I'm going to get that going as well. There's just too many colors on this thing. and they're all awesome. So let's get some of that really deep purple. Speaking of cowbell, is that deep purple that did too much cowbell? Who did Don't Fear the Reaper? Blue Oyster Cult, right? Mixing up my 80s bands. So let's do that. I like the color mask, and let's bring up the intensity. Having fun with it. There we go. There we go. Yeah, that looks nice. I did a lot of poly painting of my models long before Substance was around, so that's why, you know, I've built up a lot of these techniques over the years. Because I used to do all, you know, I paint my roughness maps and specular maps and other types of maps directly in ZBrush using black and white, or, you know, I'd export the poly paint as a texture and take it in Photoshop and use that as a basis. So it's kind of old school techniques. And the Substance has definitely taken a lot of the pain out of that kind of stuff, because it can be grueling to, when you're spending a long time painting these color maps, and then you have to paint more maps after that. So, did I overdo it? I might have. But, you know, a quote from Madeline Spencer. She said one time, someone's asked her, how do you know when the poly paint's done? It's just like, I guess when you just don't want to do it anymore. I always think it's like when you're painting something, just like when you're sculpting, and you start to realize that what you're doing is no longer improving the model, that means you're done. And you can move on to the next thing. So we can argue that if I'm making this better right now, or I'm actually just making it worse. I still think it's interesting. Like, I'm enjoying it, so I'm going to keep going with it until I decide I don't need it anymore. I need to do anything else. And then I think just turn off the color mask on the brush, and then go back to mask by color. Playing with some ideas here. Okay, do something like this. And I'll choose OK. Auto save in progress. Yeah, it is kind of mango colored. Maybe his name is Mango. I'm going to do hide mask, and I'm going to choose that light pink color again. Intensity. just messing around here. Like that. Okay, so I think I've damaged this enough. That's kind of weird. So I'll do maybe an alpha like this. That's kind of weird. Soften some of that green. I'm going to turn on symmetry and freehand and play with some of this black. I have symmetry on, so what I'll do is I'll just make some initial splotches here and there with symmetry on, and then come back, turn symmetry off, and make them less symmetrical. But just as an initial splotch where I want to put them, I'll leave symmetry on. Maybe I'll turn off symmetry now and change the alpha here because I don't like it. Maybe something like this. A little bit of blurring. There we go. Let's turn off this for a second. So that's kind of the head. Probably do some more on it. It will look more interesting as I add colors to the other parts, but that's kind of a start. What I'd like to do is add some more blues on the palps. Maybe the back of the mandibles here. Start bringing in some blues. And then the deep greens and reds on the antenna and the other parts. So still a ways to go, but I think it looks kind of cool. It's different. Some of these other guys have like, with the Katydids, of course, you just got the world is your oyster. You got these cool markings in the back here. So this right here is a model that I did, and this is all done with poly paint. So this is all poly painting of a 3D model. So this is actually a fairly low poly a low polygon model I did a while back for a VR thing. And most of that was poly paint, and then you can see, compare it with the actual bug, This is the actual bug. Of course, the actual bug looks better because it's an actual bug. And I didn't have any displacement on the other ones. It's all normal maps. But you can see where I got the color inspiration. So a lot of these things you can do with polypaint. And then some of these guys have cool dots. And look at this guy, bright blue out of nowhere. That's cool. This one's all over the map. I mean, that looks like Mobius or something, you know? Just very cool. Nice cool gradients from blue to green, and then the yellows. It's awesome. I love it. I never get tired of looking at this stuff. Cool. I'm going to leave it there for tonight. So thanks for... Yeah, because it's an actual bug. Yes, actual bugs look better. Which pen do you use? I'm using a Cintiq, so this is just a regular Cintiq pen. If that's what you mean. I forget exactly which model this is. But I'll probably get a fancier one at some point. Alright, thank you very much for watching. I really appreciate it. I don't think I will be able to do next Monday because I'm moving. So I'll probably take next week off. So I'll be back later in April. Maybe on the 7th, but I'll try and post something on the calendar and on my Instagram. So keep an eye out for it, and thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.